My name is Arthur van der Wees and I'm the Managing Director of Arthur's Legal Strategies and Systems in Amsterdam with a global practice in the digital age topics, both for the public and the private sector, both small and large organizations. We're also part of the CONCORDIA consortium on cybersecurity. In this course, I'm going to talk about digital sovereignty, a very, very hot topic, not only in the European Union, but also in other regions and countries around the world. Digital sovereignty could be defined as not becoming a digital colony. I'm of course going to dive into all the different definitions and also how to become or how to work towards becoming digital sovereign. So the world already for 20 years is in the 21st century. We are in the 21st century for 20%, almost 21. And still, we may seem that digital is not that relevant. And we're getting more and more into the mode that we see it's essential, it's needed, it's required, and basically it's part of every day of our life. So we need to have a different mindset than the last 30 years or so that we had before. This is because the internet and cyber and online is not only online and cyber anymore. It's cyber physical, it's part of safety, it's part of daily life, as I mentioned. And we're in a 21st century where I see it, it's a combination of physical, cyber physical, and physical cyber. Cyber physical is basically going from the human and organizational perspective into a cyber domain and then going out again. And of course, this is a combination of man and machine. So the multiplicity is part of this as well. And machines, not necessarily AI or robotics, but machines are already deciding upon quite a few parts of our lives. This is very relevant for digital sovereignty, of course. The other one that we may have missed out on and always looking at stuff that we have learned before is people process technology. Well, people process technology misses out on a major component, which is data. And data can be unstructured. If it's structured, we can call it information. We can have it to a certain abstract level, and then it's called attributes. And if we use the information, the attributes, we can call it knowledge or expertise. So these elements are now a vital part of the digital domain and have been forgotten, but are a very important part to talk about and consider digital sovereignty. Digital sovereignty can be defined in quite a few different ways. The freedom from external control is one of those, human-centric control of influence. The ability to rule is, of course, one that we know from the history and is still relevant there. Sovereignty comes, with internal and external responsibilities. I'm going to talk about that a bit later on. But we can also define digital sovereignty in a negative because it's sometimes easier to remember. Or it can be used as a validation tool to verify to what extent we already have met the digital sovereignty thresholds that we're looking for. And in this case, we came up with four, basically, not to further develop in a digital colony, as I mentioned already in my introduction, but also not to facilitate the rise of digital feudalism, not to further lose control over human and societal values. And the last one, not further lose control, ownership and benefit of the value, accessibility, use, and accuracy of our data, your data, my data, not only personal, but also non-personal data. Data of your company, your organization, which could be intellectual property rights, could be valuable information or sensitive information or national security information. So these are all quite relevant, and the data-centric approach should not be forgotten when you think about digital sovereignty. Give you an example from the past, and we are here based in Amsterdam, and in the Netherlands. So, of course, the example is about windmills. Now, I make a joke, but windmills was our first industrial revolutionary part. It was a great leap into the future. Yet, feudalism was actually increased because the corn that used to be grinded by farmers themselves were now collected and sent to windmills, to mechanize mills, and they did it for them. But actually, the diets and the quality of the oat was decreasing, and they lost control, and therefore, they went into more feudalism than before. And of course, this is just a metaphor, an example of what we are facing now when we think about data feudalism, where people feel they're losing control over their own life. They feel they lose control over their digital profile, and they don't know what's happened with it. So the loss of control is a very easy thing to remember and talk about digital sovereignty. I think the easiest one to remember is the ability, to have meaningful control and freedom. So the ability and the degree to have meaningful control and freedom. There are several different subsets of digital sovereignty, and digital sovereignty is not necessarily even the overarching concept. And here are just a couple of examples that you can see, including shared sovereignty, member state sovereignty, country national sovereignty, right? Those kind of things we all remember. A union sovereignty, whether it's European Union or a federation or a republic, it doesn't really matter. And of course, societal sovereignty. Do we feel sovereign as a society, either in a country or in a region with multiple countries, or in any other context? Individual sovereignty is that you, as an individual, have your human rights and universal rights, and you should be in control of that to a certain extent. With, as we mentioned before, is a part of a combination of freedoms and responsibilities. And the last one is digital sovereignty, also one that is a hot topic, of course, also within the European Union, when we talk about the Data Governance Act, how to govern public open data, what can we add to it, and to what extent can we use it and share it both internally and globally. And also on the United Nations level, with the data for Sustainable Development Goals, this is one that is quite relevant as well, and where data feudalism is also being discussed extensively, and we're a part of the discussion as well. Give you an example of in the domain of digital of data sovereignty, of course, in the digital domain, where you see the balancing out between freedoms, human values, the ability to innovate, all the opportunities that come out of it, and are these distributed fairly and in a balanced way. And then, of course, sustainability, both sustainable, meaning future-proof, as well as, of course, also the green sustainability, the circular part of it, basically the ecological parts of our future. These are all human-centric approaches on what these can be taken into account when you think about sovereignty in general. And then when you add data sovereignty to it, you see that dynamic data, where data is becoming more and more dynamic. It can change, it can morph, it can be added, it can be enriched, it can be merged and shared in many ways. It's not just static anymore, and therefore control is what it's all about. Data ownership necessarily is not that interesting, because in the digital domain, if I send an email out, then you already have a copy of my data. So data control is a way better notion to think about than ownership. It's about whether you have control or not, and then whether or not people can access it, or you can access it, and others can get access rights. And with that, you get to use and data and digital rights management, and be able to monitoring what's happening, and to change and to step in where necessary. All this in an accountable way, meaning that you can document these data flows and the use of it. And with that, you can get to a certain level of data sovereignty, and digital sovereignty then is part of that. But it's way bigger than that, and I can't talk about everything in a short course like this. But I'm going to add a couple of dimensions for you here. When we think about digital sovereignty, we think about four main domains, and the domains are, yes, sovereignty and collaborative resilience. Collaborative resilience meaning sharing data, being co-owner of systems and ecosystems and co-responsible of it. meaning also that you need to chip in, you need to put energy in resources, funds where necessary, and prepare for the future together. The other one is research and innovation. Deep research, which is only relevant now to start, but factually in the real world, it's going to be relevant in 10 years or whatever. Innovation in how to convert those research results into something practical, how to implement them in a way that it distributes again the allocation of both risk and fruits later on downstream. The third one is education. We need to start with this, in my point of view, when kids are already 4 or 5 years old, not when they're university is way too late. This is part of daily life, so we need to also to start educating there. But of course, it's also about reskilling of people, moving from one sector to the other, as well as upskilling and adding digital skills to traditional skills as well. So with that, people can do what they like, and they can be resilient themselves and be part of the workforce and making money and have a great life. So it's quite bigger than that. And of course, economic development is definitely prerequisite for that. We can come up with all kind of nice examples and nice research and nice results, but there needs to be some kind of economic model, either in euros or dollars or data or impact. It's not necessarily only monetary backbone anymore. The data backbone and the impact backbone is as important. Whether you talk about sustainable development goals or talk about Green Deal sustainability goals, the Paris Treaty, and so many others that are part of this. You can do really great things, but then if you're losing your digital sovereignty in those domains, then you have a big problem. So these are 4 domains, and these are intertwined, like DNA, and they're contextual. So it depends. It's not always 25, 25, 25, 25%. It depends on which phase you are in the life cycle, whether you're focusing on an objective you want to meet, whether you want to mitigate a challenge, or whether you want to do a scenario to see what happens if, what if. Because in cybersecurity, the malicious actors on the other side do exactly the same thing. So, the cat and mouse game never stops, and we need to do these practices as well. So when you look at where to start, well, we already did 3 of these 4, and the third one I'm going to dive into a little bit in a couple of minutes, a little bit deeper. So first, the perspective. You need to have a common perspective, and the main objective here is digital sovereignty. And then all the subsets, parts, you can focus on anything. Doesn't matter where you start, as long as you start. That is where you start. The second one is context. And the context in this case, that the notion of that these are contextual, impact-based symbiosis of those 4 main domains. And again, sometimes it's 90% research and only 10% focusing on economic development and competition, or it really depends on the use case. Number 3 is the stakeholder plotting. There are way more stakeholders in this domain than you may think, and it's very important to challenge your maps and the notion of who is a stakeholder here. And I will dive into a bit later. And then the 4th one, if you have the perspective, the common goal, you have the context that that you need interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary teams and resources and energy, then you can figure out common values of each stakeholder, what's in it for them, because everybody has its own value, and we need to figure out what the value is, and of course impact side, because everything you do also has a negative and a positive. So this is a lot of work, but it's very relevant to do. When you talk about the stakeholders, there are a lot of stakeholders. There are a lot of stakeholders that influence, that are not being directly part of your ecosystem, but they're definitely there. And not only malicious actors, which you can see here in number 5, but quite a few others. And don't forget investors and financiers. They are indirectly part of it. They have been chipping in, they have been financing, they are doing venture capital or any other, or capital from public sector or other capital and knowledge, and they want to see a certain return, whether it's impact or meeting goals or objectives, or just a financial monetary return on investment. We need to understand that this is part of the influence. And if we look at the internet itself is owned by all those different finances, parties, companies, sectors, and players. And there's nothing there that is not owned by anybody. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. So you need to have a different notion of the 21st century internet. Quite a few stakeholders. We're not going to work through all them, but have a good look. Come up with, perhaps you can challenge this and come up with number 11, 12, 13. I think it's pretty comprehensive already, but it's definitely not exhaustive. So digital sovereignty is about freedom. It's about control, and with that, of course, freedom doesn't come for free, and sovereignty doesn't come for free as well. There's a joint responsibility to lean in, to pick up your responsibility, to be co-accountable, co-responsible, to make this work. Otherwise, it's pretty useless. And it's not only during, because we are in a current world. And of course, how can we start with digital sovereignty? Well, how about trying to figure out whether we can control the systems, services, and products we are using today? To what extent can we already, to what degree can we already, control these, and what do we don't know yet? Meanwhile, we can also come up with thinking about what we need to manufacture or provide or develop ourselves. And then we can be less dependent on systems that we do not fully control, or we feel we don't fully control those. So this is a combination. Of course, then it's about not only building it and achieving it, but also sustaining it, because the world is dynamic. It will change every day, every nanosecond. So there's always a lot of things to do, which is good for everybody to keep us busy. So balancing out, because we need to make decisions. We can't get we can't do only think about freedom without the responsibility, and the other way around doesn't work as well. So this is a very challenging problem set. Now, there is no one solution. There is no government or sector or company or technical fixture that can solve this alone. There is no one. There's no centralized fixture. It's a combination of centralized models, hybrid models, distributed models, and what have you. This is really about working together as teams to create outcomes, to build, achieve, and sustain digital sovereignty. And this is something that you need to help out with as well, because this is a team sport, and I definitely hope you're going to be part of it. I will definitely be part of the team, and I hope to see you there. Have a nice day.